Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Hello, everyone. This is Kelly. Thank you so much for pressing play on this podcast today. I have a really special treat. A very, very good close friend of mine, Jen Liddy, who also happens to be a business coach, is on the show with me today, and we are talking about why your message matters. And unless you might think this is just for business owners or just for entrepreneurs and say, I'll listen to the next one, just hold the phone, stop right where you are, and I want you to hear this. This is for everyone. Regardless of your work situation, regardless of, who you're around all the time, if you're running your own business or not running your own business, what you have to say matters, and it can make a huge difference in someone's life. So I really want you to listen to this and be in it from that perspective. As a business owner or not, how can your words make a difference? Because they can, and they do. Let me tell you a little bit about Jen. After making the terrifying leap from teacher to business owner, Jen Liddy learned the hard way that running a business didn't have to be so exhausting or confusing. Now, as a business development coach, she teaches women entrepreneurs that it's possible to have life and a business, and that success comes when we master our message to attract the right clients to us with ease. You are going to adore Jen just like I do. I know. I just know. So, without further ado, here is Jen Liddy. Well, Jen Liddy, I can't believe it's been this long before I've actually had you on my podcast, but welcome finally to In Her Voice.
Thank you, Kel.
So just so my listeners, our listeners have a little background, Jen Liddy and I are very close personal friends. She lives in the Syracuse area, and we spend a lot of time talking with each other and working through our own stuff and talking about coaching. And I'm really excited to have you on today to talk about why our message matters.
Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and it's long overdue. I can't believe I've been podcasting In Her Voice now. Are you ready for this? For 3 years.
I wondered if it was that long. That's impressive, Kelly. Do you know most people don't make it through the first year? My podcasting editor told me that people make it like, I think it's less than 8 episodes or something before they give up.
Wow. I just really love it. I feel like that's where I'm in my zone. So I come back to it because I feel so good when I'm here. And you have a podcast too. What's the name of your podcast again?
Yes, my podcast is called The Idea Space. It's a place for women to create room in their brains and in their lives so that they can grow their business.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And one of the things that I love about you is that our brains, I think, work really differently. Mm-hmm. And so I love coming to Jen because she can sort of like make order of the hot mess that's in my mind. Mm-hmm. And then I think you come to me because I can sort of get that creative spark going and remind you how creative you are.
100% true. We are the yin and yang for each other. Yes.
Very, very much so. So why don't you start with, we got this idea for this podcast because we were talking the other day. We've been walking and talking together all during lockdown on the phone, of course, but we're walking together. And you told me this really interesting story, and it really sort of brought the point home of like why it matters so much as women and as entrepreneurs that we really broadcast our message loud and clear and wide for everyone to hear.
Yes. So this is the story. I had heard from a client of mine about this woman doctor locally who does these hormone replacement pellet things. And I was really intrigued. So I was asking her, like, what are the benefits? What have you seen change in your life? And she said, well, I have more energy. I can sleep through the night. My hair has stopped falling out. I want to have sex with my husband again. Like, she was telling me all of these benefits. And I was like, I need to know what this is. So I looked the doctor up, and she doesn't really advertise that she does this hormone replacement, this bioidentical hormone replacement stuff. She's called a medical weight loss doctor, and I've just never paid attention to her. I drive by her office all the time because she's really centrally located. But I've never paid attention because I don't need medical weight loss. Like, that's not a problem that I'm going to solve that way, right? So I went and I had the blood work done, and she told me that my testosterone was at level 10. And I said, well, what is it supposed to be? And she said, 150 to 300. And I was like, well, why bother to have any at all if it's just going to be 10, right? So I was like, what are we going to do about this? And there's things we can do. But after that, I said, I've been struggling with these symptoms for a long time, like all through my 40s. And I just turned 50 in April. And I said, what kind of marketing do you guys do to let women know that this is something that you offer? And she said, well, we don't really have to market because people come to us through referrals, and the right people just find us, and we're very busy as it is. And I thought, I've been struggling with these symptoms, no lie, for 10 years since I turned 40. And when I turned 40, my doctor shrugged at me and said, well, you're just in your 40s now. This is how it is. And I thought, imagine how my life could have been different for the last 10 years if I had heard about this messaging that there was out there, that there was this thing available to me. And if it had been said in the right way where my ears needed to hear it. And I got the doctor's perspective. Like, we don't really need to market because our business is good enough. But the reason I brought it up to you was because I was just so shocked that, like, that was kind of her attitude. Like, yeah, well, it's enough. We haven't, like, it's good enough for us. And I thought about how many of my clients have something that can change somebody's life in this way. Like, as a business development coach, I help creative female entrepreneurs who want to get their business out there and grow it. But they're really terrified to share their messaging for lots of reasons. They don't want to be seen, or it's vulnerable, or maybe somebody else is already doing it, or doing it better, or doing it longer. And so they keep their messaging to themselves. And I thought this was the most perfect example of why sharing our message is vital, because we could change somebody's life by sharing our message.
Mm-hmm. I love what you're saying so much. And it really hit home to me because, like, in that example that you shared, I also related to that. I mean, I'm almost 46 and I'm not sleeping through the night and my cycle is kind of wacky. And, I have talked with my own doctor about this, and it's the same thing. Oh, well, this just happens when women are in their 40s.
The big shrug.
Yeah. Like, oh, well, this is what you have to deal with. And so I would also have never heard of this if you hadn't shared that with me. And so, while yes, word of mouth is working for her, how many more lives might she change if she just talked about it a little bit?
Yeah. And marketed it and put it out there, or like overtly told her clients, because people want to share information, but they don't always feel comfortable doing that. I'm a person who always feels comfortable talking about the ridiculous things that are going on with me, because I know if I'm dealing with it, somebody else is dealing with it.
100%.
So I'm a sharer, but most people, they would be happy to share, but they either feel like, whoa, this is really private information, or this is a weird topic to talk about, or I don't know how to share this effectively. So I think that even sitting in her office talking about what the outcomes are going to be for this patient, even if she merely mentioned, I bet you have a lot of friends who struggle with this too. Did you know we have a referral reward program? Or have you thought about telling some of your friends about this?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so really what I'd like to get into first is in this idea of, like, why our message is so important and why really it's a service to speak it out, that is a paradigm shift, I think, for a lot of people. And it was a paradigm shift for me too. And if I'm being completely transparent, I'm still working on it because there are some days where these are the thoughts that I have. Oh, I just talked about that yesterday. People don't want to hear me talk about that again. Or, oh, I already did a podcast episode on that 6 months ago. I don't want to be too repetitive. Or, gosh, people are probably so sick of me being on here telling them they're worthy. Which, like, even as I say that sentence, I hear how ridiculous it is. Because, like, who gets sick of hearing that?
I know.
Right?
I know.
And yet it can still be a struggle. So I'm wondering if maybe you can talk a little bit about why. Let's talk about that piece first. Like, why do you think as women, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, it is such a struggle for us to own what an impact we have the potential to make?
I want to speak personally first. When I was growing up, I was a noisy kid. I had a lot to say. I had a lot of opinions. I was very judgmental. I always had something to say about anything that was happening within the family. I'm highly extroverted. Excuse me. And my parents are fairly introverted. And so to them, especially to my dad, I was a real pain in the neck. I was kind of annoying, like, just be quiet. Nobody, and I heard this a lot, nobody needs to hear every opinion that you have as you're having it. And so when you get that message washed over you, and I don't want to say it was said in like a horrible, mean way, but it was just kind of like, Jenny, shut up already, right? Like, I would have an opinion about what we were having for dinner and what time I had to go to bed and what we were watching on TV. And, over and over again, I heard, just be quiet. There's 6 people living in this house and, your opinion doesn't matter more than anybody else's opinion. And that was just the messaging. It was 70s and 80s kind of, feral children parent, the parenting of feral children kind of thing. And so I think that has stayed with me for a long time, that, it's annoying to other people to constantly be sharing your opinion. So I think that's something that I have had to deal with, certainly in therapy. And I've used like tapping techniques and other therapeutic healing techniques to be able to speak my voice. Last year in April, I was having an incredible trouble putting my messaging out there. I was doing a specific program all about messaging for myself. And I had this blockage. It was like an energetic blockage in my throat. And so I did some healing around it. And I realized a lot of it was coming from what my dad specifically would say if he saw me on social media. And I want to clarify here, my dad is not even on social media. My dad does not listen to my podcast. He doesn't read anything I write. He barely even knows that I have a business. He's not really interested in it. But I was hung up on what would my father say about all this messaging, this direct, overt messaging to help female entrepreneurs. What would he say about it? He would roll his eyes. Like, I had a whole story. Like, he would roll his eyes. He would talk about, maybe to his wife, how annoying I was. Maybe he would talk about me behind my back with my siblings. All huge stories. And frankly, I don't think he thinks about it one way or the other. But I just have carried this story with me. And last year, I went back to therapy to really get through this and heal this old wound of, you're just so noisy, nobody wants to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, I feel like that kind of healing, sometimes we think, what does that have to do with business? Right? Yeah. Oh, like that, oh, well, what does that have to do with business? Why do I need to go to therapy? Or why do I need a coach to help me work on these kinds of things? Well, the fact of the matter is, until we work on those kind of things, they will continue to get in our way.
In the most insidious ways, in ways that you can't even imagine. And frankly, when it comes down to it, especially if you are a solopreneur, but no matter what kind of entrepreneur you are, putting yourself out there is very vulnerable. And if you want to be a successful solopreneur or entrepreneur, you need to be seen. You need to make offers. You need to have a message that resonates with your audience. You need to know the kinds of words your audience needs to hear so that they can see you and hear you in this noisy world. And that is very, very scary for women. I have found for women especially, they feel like they're yucky. They feel like they feel like it's pushy and aggressive. Mm-hmm. And so everywhere in our business, it's important to be able to be seen in alignment with ourselves. And what I find is some women, because it's so hard to be seen for who we are, they will sometimes adopt a persona or a voice that's not really theirs. Like they see something that's working online for somebody else and they try to adopt her words or her style, and it doesn't resonate with the audience because the audience can smell it a mile away. The audience wants to know who you are and how you say things. And that's really scary, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I think too, what's super interesting to me about, what we're really talking about is marketing.
Yes.
Which sometimes I think I agree feels like a little bit like a dirty word, mm-hmm. like marketing. But when you are a solopreneur, especially, think about what you're marketing. You're marketing yourself. You're marketing your story. You're marketing your superpowers, right? And how are people going to understand what those things are if you're not willing to let them see it?
Yeah. And if you were a young child and a young woman, and maybe a woman even into your 30s, 40s, and 50s, who's let other people's voices float to the top because it's just been easier, or because somebody told you that they didn't really care about your voice, it's a huge shift. And it's a scary shift for women to make in their businesses. And that's why I think marketing, to a lot of women has become a dirty word. I remember in my first business, I was the co-owner of a fitness studio. I was the operations person and the communications person. And it was really my job to learn marketing. And I had every excuse in the book. I was too dumb to learn marketing. I didn't understand the tech of it. This was for other people. I'm not savvy enough to learn marketing. We'll figure it out without marketing. We did like the cross your fingers strategy, which PS doesn't work. And so I think we make lots of excuses to avoid marketing, but until we see that it's not a dirty word, it doesn't have to be yucky. It really can be in alignment with who you are and what your audience needs. Because one of the best things in a coaching session, I said this to a client. She really didn't want to market herself. She really didn't want to put herself out there. And I asked her to think about the version of herself that she was, where she was at the beginning, and all of the work that she's done and all of the help that she can give people, but to go back to that version of herself when she was at her lowest point. And if she could speak directly to that person, what would she say? And she actually teared up because it brought her right back to a time in her life that was really hard. And she actually needed all the things that she now knows. She just didn't have access to it. And so when she could bring that version of herself to light, she could speak directly to her. And so I think if we can, even put a sticky note on our computer when we're doing a Facebook Live or when we're writing some marketing copy or we're planning a program, and remember exactly who we are creating this for, it will be so much easier. Then it doesn't feel like marketing, it feels like helping.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is really the shift that needs to happen, mm-hmm. because just like this doctor that we're talking about, like mm-hmm. she has a potential to change someone's life. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure she wants to do that. Like, I'm sure that's why she does what she does.
Yes.
Right? And that's why I do what I do. That's why you do what you do, because you know that we can make an impact. And when we empower other women to step into their voice and to do what they were called to do, then they make an impact on the world. And it's this ripple effect. And that that's a powerful motivator. And at the same time, it takes conscious effort. And so you mentioned a couple of things just now, like a couple of tools and strategies we can use, like have the sticky note, remember where you came from, remember who you're talking to. What are some other strategies that we can use to really, I feel like almost we just have to get out of our head and get into our heart and go from there?
Well, it's funny that you use that language, because when I teach my clients, when we talk about messaging specifically and content creation, is I see it as writing a love letter to our audience. You know, our audience, some days our audience needs a warm hug, and other days our audience needs a kick in the butt. And my marketing is kind of a combination of the two. So one of the things I ask my clients to do when they're writing is to use the word you. And why that helps is it puts the focus on the other person. You know, how would you feel if you could sleep through the night? What would it change in your life to know that you had your sex drive back? What would it do for your confidence to feel that you could build muscle again when you've been trying for so long and you haven't been seeing any results? Like, those are the things that I'm struggling with in terms of my own hormones. And so if the marketing was just speaking to me like that, like the you language, it's a huge shift. And it also takes the onus off being like, I can help you sleep through the night. I can help you get your sex drive back. I can help you build up muscle again. It's not about like me as the service provider at all. It's about you as the audience member and how I can help you. And that shift, when my clients start to make that shift, it's not natural for them, and they need to train themselves. And that's the work that we do, is like to learn how to speak differently to our clients so that it feels like a love letter, and so that it lands on them, so that they can actually hear it. Because frankly, people are not that interested in I messages. Like, you might see something like, oh, I'm so excited. Like, so an example, like maybe to publish this podcast and market this podcast, maybe you would have written, so excited to talk to my friend Jen Liddy. And frankly, that's not really that interesting to people, because you might be excited, but they don't really care that you're excited
right, they
about
don't know
this.
You yet. Exactly.
And so the way to market this podcast might be different. Like, have you ever felt like marketing and messaging is such a struggle? Have you ever wanted to hide from marketing? Like, do you see how it's so different energetically? And it doesn't become like yucky. It's not yucky to say that. It's like inviting them in, like, hey, have you ever struggled with this? Because I have a person who can help you with that today. And she's going to talk about exactly how. That is much more, well, it's going to land with them much more, but it also feels more loving to them.
Yeah, I like that. Another strategy that I use when I get into that place of like, oh, people don't really want to hear this again, is I go to my BFF Brene Brown, and I use some language that I learned from her, and that is the story I'm telling myself The story I'm telling myself is people don't want to hear this right now. And that reminds me, like, just saying those words reminds me, oh, hey, I have no idea what those people are thinking.
And I have no idea what my dad is thinking, right? I had this huge story for so long. And if I had actually ever asked him, I know he would have just chuckled at me and been like, you're crazy. That is not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that oftentimes too with my mom. And it's, I feel like I've over the past 6 months, I've been doing a lot of work of just sort of releasing those energetic ties that I have to like the worry about what my mom would think or what my mom would say. And it's so interesting because I just sent out a newsletter the other day, and I know that my mom reads all of those. She doesn't listen to the podcast, but she reads all of those. And every now and then she'll like send me back an email that says something like, oh, you really should proofread this before you send it out or something like that, which like, you know, guts me. But she sent back an email and she said, when I read this, it made me cry because I know how much your grandma loved you. And she shared with me some of her memories of my grandma, because that's what my newsletter was about. And, it just reminded me, like, I don't know what she's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing everyone a disservice if I try to put thoughts in their head.
Yes, because the story that we have is, I've already said this 1,000 times. I've already said it in 100 different ways. Like, if people were interested, they would already have joined my program or signed up for my list or whatever. And I really want people to know, when you're putting out your messaging in there, out into the world, I mean, it is a very long journey for your audience. I know that there are stories out there on the internet of, people who have made 6 figures in, 7 weeks, and they're standing in front of their private jets. And those are lies. Those are not the normal, typical cases. It is a very long journey to develop a relationship with your audience. And sometimes people need to be on your list 3 years, 5 years before they ever get the courage to take the stand to set up a call with you, or buy that course that you have, or download your freebie. And it's probably not because they're annoyed by you. If they were annoyed by you, they would block you or they would unsubscribe, right? We have to remember that it just takes people courage. They don't quite trust themselves that they will be able to really do the thing that you think they can do, that you're saying that they can do, or solve the problem that you know that they have. It's much more about their own self-trust and their own courage than it is about you being annoying or bothering them. If they didn't want to follow you, they are welcome to unsubscribe.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I say to myself a lot, because I get into a headspace of, well, someone has already done this and someone has already said this. And I remind myself, and in this reminder, I hope I'm reminding everyone who's listening, all of it has been said. Mm-hmm. All of it has been said. All of it has been done. And I think that what is beautiful about, Jen, you sharing your message the way you share it is you share it in a way only Jen Liddy can. Mm-hmm. And I share my message in a way only Kelly Covert can. And when we recognize the beauty of that unique gift and talent that just we as people bring to the table, that changes everything. Because again, maybe someone needs to hear this from, whoever famous person, but maybe when I say it, it's going to hit in the right way. And I think we all need to recognize that our originality does not come from what we say. It comes from how we say it.
Right. And also why we say it, because the story behind why we're so passionate to have our voices be heard is different for each one of us.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I want to switch gears just a little bit, because I know that there are some people who listen to this podcast who aren't entrepreneurs and aren't business people. And you may be wondering, well, what does this have to do with me? And I think still, especially in our world right now, what we have on our heart is important. And so can you talk a little bit about why you think this idea of messaging matters, even if it's not in the context of marketing?
100%. And I'm really glad you asked, because I have a lot of friends who are not entrepreneurs, and they still deserve to have their voices heard. And they have mostly gone through life taking care of other people's needs, listening to other people's wants, letting other people's voices be amplified to the point where they have tamped down their own so much that they don't even quite know what their true authentic voice is anymore. And so even if you don't have a business, even if you are a person who doesn't have a job, even if your job is to lead your family and you are a stay-at-home parent, or you are running an organization and you are volunteering, like you're not quote unquote making money for the work that you are and the service you are providing, you deserve to have your message heard. And actually, I was just talking to a friend of mine this morning before this call, who has spent the last year and a half learning how to do this. And we've had so many conversations about how to tap into saying things in a way so that she can be heard among the noise in her family. And today she made a decision. Actually, it was yesterday she made a decision and she told her family, this is what I want. And her family, because they have been retrained over the course of the year and a half to start to hear her voice and hear her messaging, they looked at her because they had a plan in place. And she said, I'd really like to tweak the plan this way because I need X, Y, and Z. And so the family looked at her and said, no problem. And they just made it happen. And there was no drama. And she finally, after 18 years, has felt seen in her own family.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? The word that comes up to my mind as you tell that story is this idea of deserving. As people, we deserve to have our voices be heard. And again, we are doing our family, our friends, and ourselves a disservice if we don't find a way to stand firmly in that. And this is really about feeling empowered in your life, feeling like you have a say and feeling like you matter. And I think with everything that's going on in the world right now, following the murder of George Floyd and all of the protests nationwide, I think we're seeing this even more. Like we're really understanding the importance of honoring everyone's voice.
I think to go along with that, you might, especially when it comes to race relations and white privilege, all of the things that I know I'm struggling with right now to work through in my head. I'm not rushing to put a message out there about it yet, because I really need to make sure that my message and how I feel about it is true to me, and I don't want it to be hollow with my audience. And so if you are somebody who needs to really work through your thoughts before you share your message, then please honor that. You don't need to rush to put something out there just to slapdash it up. And it's true with marketing, it's true with communicating with your family, it's true with communicating with your employees or any of your constituents. It is your prerogative to master your message, to make sure that it's authentic. And in order to do that, before you put it out there, you really need to like what you have to say, and it needs to feel like you. And what I think happens to a lot of my clients, by the time I meet them, their message is either so muddled in their head because they have so many thoughts and they've never been able to get them out before. They've never been able to say them in a way that sounds clear. And so it's part of it is really just getting clarity on how you feel and what you're thinking, and kind of practicing what it looks like and being okay with like that crappy first draft, right? Like the shitty first draft that we sometimes need to do, even if it's a conversation that we're going to have with our partner or it's some messaging we're going to put out to our audience. You need to be in alignment with yourself and your message before you put it out there. I really believe that very strongly. So not trying to look like someone else, not trying to sound like someone else, not trying to take somebody else's words, because your audience knows, whether it's your kids or your partner or your audience or your employees, they know when they're not your words.
100%. And this is where we have an opportunity to connect with our inner voice.
Yes.
Who is so magical and who will guide us and who we can depend on and who will bring us into alignment. And doing that work, that special work, whatever your practices look like of connecting with your inner voice, make all the difference in the world. And that is if you're a business person, if you work in corporate America, if you are a stay-at-home mom, if you are a volunteer, wherever you might be, it makes all the difference.
I agree.
So, Jen, in your life these days, what is your inner voice saying to you?
I think my inner voice is just over and over again is saying, slow down. And whether that means, in my life on a day-to-day basis. COVID has really helped with that, right? I've really been slowing down. But also this idea of I'm not really sure what messaging to put out there around how I feel and what I think about what's going on with the systemic racism and white privilege, etc. And that it's okay to slow down and really consider what I want to say before I say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that that's really good wisdom from your inner voice that we can all just sort of soak in too.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
So, I talk to you all the time and I could talk to you for hours. Every time we talk, I'm like, how did an hour go by already? But unfortunately we cannot talk all day. I would, however, like for you to share, with my audience what you have upcoming. You have something really exciting and how they can connect with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about this mastermind I created. It's called the Content Creators Mastermind. It's specifically for entrepreneurs who are looking to focus on some areas in their business where they have not quite mastered their message. They are not consistent with putting their messaging out there. And frankly, a lot of them who are joining don't quite know what their messaging is. And so it's a way to be in a supportive group with other like-minded entrepreneurs, get your hand held, get your copy looked at, and really learn some important things so that your messaging feels more like you. It's a 3-month mastermind program, and we're starting in the beginning of July 7th through September.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
And where can people learn more about that?
At my website, www.jenliddy.com/mastermind. And I'm a 1N Jen, so it's JENLIDDY.
And I will most certainly put links in the show notes and in whatever podcast app that you're listening to. So you should just be able to go right there and click through and learn more about Jen's mastermind. I can vouch for Jen. She is an amazing coach, and you will not regret investing in your business in this way for sure. And how about social media?
Oh, yes. I love the socials. I am on Instagram and Facebook. I'm at Jen Liddy Coach, Jen, again, Jen Liddy Coach. I should be more, I guess I'm going to should on myself here. I should be on LinkedIn more. I am on LinkedIn, but my favorite place to be is Facebook, but I do show up on Instagram and I do have a LinkedIn presence too.
Excellent. So you guys can all go say hi to Jen.
Yep. I'm very interactive. I answer all my own emails and I do all my own social media.
Yeah. And you'll love her Instagram because she always posts beautiful pictures of the sky and the weather,
love the sky.
which I really love. That's my favorite. And also good informational things as well, of course. Yes. So Jen, my good friend, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving to us today from your deep well of wisdom. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. I appreciate you. And I want to thank the listeners for listening all the way through and really encourage people to reach out with questions, because I want you to know that whatever your question is or whatever your fear is, you're not the only one. So just reach out if you have questions.
100%. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Cal. Bye.
I hope you love that as much as I do. I just feel like that message really is important. I want you to know that what is in your heart needs to be spoken with your voice. And that is really what is the heart of this podcast. The purpose of this podcast is for you, my dear listener, you to walk away feeling worthy, to understand how to connect with your inner voice, and to feel empowered to do what it tells you to do, to say what it asks you to say. Because I truly believe that when we are in that place, when we are listening and speaking and acting and doing and being according to what our inner voice is asking us, that is when we are at our most powerful. That is when we are most ourselves. And that's also when we are going to feel the best. That's when we're going to feel the best. And, speaking of feeling the best, I want to let you know, if you don't already, that I am doing another Create the Life You Want workshop. It is going to be on Thursday, June 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And I just want to ask you this question. What would it feel like if every night when you went to bed, when you laid your head down on your pillow, you felt fulfilled? And every morning when you woke up and you opened your eyes, you felt worthy? What would that feel like? What would change in your life if you felt that way? What would you be more motivated to do or to be if you felt that way? What would you feel more empowered to say if you felt that way? That is what practices are about. That is why I talk about it so much. It is not the big actions that truly help us feel fulfilled. And they do, but how often are we doing those, right? It is the little tiny practices that we string together day in and day out that create the feeling that spurs us on to action for the big things. But without those daily practices, those small things that we're doing every day to help us feel supported, to help us feel grounded, to help us feel centered, to help us feel worthy, we're not going to have the energy or the bandwidth or the motivation to do the big things that can really move us forward. And so, while it may seem counterintuitive to spend time thinking about these small daily things, I want you to know it makes all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. And that is a gift I would love for you to give yourself. Aren't you tired? Aren't you tired of not feeling that way? I have to tell you, there are days when I don't feel that way. It's not a 100% end game. And on those days, those are the days that I get reminded of why I write the same sentences down in my journal every single morning, and why I, read what I'm deeply committed to every single day, and why I write down what I'm grateful for every single night before I go to bed. Because I want to feel good. I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel worthy. And we all deserve that. So if you feel like I'm talking right into your soul, I want you to stop what you're doing. I want you to pick up your phone and go to kellycovert.com/practices and register for my workshop. I promise you, you will not regret it. Remember this. You are a powerful being. You are a powerful woman. And all it takes to harness that power is to understand that it is already there and that you are worthy of using it. Please don't ever forget. You are worthy.